Welcome back to the Sports Complex on a Monday afternoon. Lots happened over the weekend. The NFL wildcard weekend, lots of news in college football, a lot of basketball as well, some highs, some lows, some very, very cold. All happened over the weekend. We'll get into all the talk around Texas football, the departures, the arrivals, all of that happening at Texas. We'll get into the NFL wildcard weekend and the positives and the negatives and who's getting fired and who should be fired and who should be traded and who should be cut and who takes the blame and who takes the credit. We'll get into all of that here on the Sports Complex today. We will get into college basketball and is it time to start panicking at Texas? We'll get into that and the NBA and maybe some trades kept coming and maybe some teams and everybody playing on MLK Day. We'll even update you on the games that are happening right now. And, of course, the Steelers and Bills happening right now as well. That game was postponed to today. That game is happening right now. We'll give you updates on that as well. And, of course, your text messages. 512-447-3776. 512-447-3776 is the text line number. You guys drive the show. I just try to keep it on the rails. So, your reactions to a wild card weekend and the week at Texas football, all of that, or Texas basketball, any of that you want to put on there, send that in on the text line, 512-447-3776. I know my man Nate already texted in before the show to try and let me take it easy on the Cowboys, which probably is not going to happen. I don't think anyone's going to take it too easy on the Cowboys today after that. But let's start with some Texas news. This was one that there was consistent news coming out, especially on Saturday and Sunday, about what was happening at Texas. We can start off telling you that Jahdae Barron, who was the last name that could still enter the draft, that was a questionable to come back or enter the draft. Jahdae Barron, probably the best defensive back for many years for Texas. Not one of the younger guys, but the guys that are still there. Jahdae Barron is returning. He put out on his Instagram that he will be returning to the 40 acres next season, giving you a little bit more depth in that secondary where so many guys had walked away or were going to the draft or were leaving Texas that you really need some help. Jahdae Barron is coming back to Texas, and one of the reasons he might be coming back is we also got the report that Dwayne Aquina, the coach for a long time, the defensive backs coach for a long time at Texas under Mack Brown, so many great defensive backs came out of that team and that coaching scheme and that what Dwayne Aquina did and progressing defensive backs, everything that he brought to this Texas team, that with Johnny Nansen, he was working for him in Arizona, that he gets the call, will be returning to Texas to work with some of these defensive backs, and that maybe Jahdae Barron wants to work with another guy that give him some more input on how to become an NFL DB, another year in that system to help develop. And so that is big news there. We also saw that Isaiah Bond, the wide receiver that was the leader in targets and leader receptions at Alabama this season, he entered the transfer portal basically immediately after Nick Saban stepped down. He did not wait for the news of who was coming. He did not necessarily care who was going. If Nick Saban wasn't there, he was ready to move on, and he moved on to Texas. So Isaiah Bond gets another star wide receiver in there to go with Matthew Golden, who's a good player. You still have guys like Jonte Cook that are on this roster that played some last year as a freshman. You have some good young players, and they may not be done in that world either with Isaiah Bond transferring to Texas. Keep in mind that the transfer portal is still open at Alabama. Some names could still come out there. The transfer portal is open for 30 days at Washington now as well, with Kalen DeBoer taking that job, which we can mention Jabbar Muhammad has entered the transfer portal in Washington, and that is a name to watch for Texas. The defensive back Jabbar Muhammad, who is also cousins with Texas player Malik Muhammad, he is there. He apparently has taken a visit to Texas, has interest there, or not has taken a visit. Texas went to go visit him in Dallas. He was interested in Texas, so he's also interested in Oregon. And we know that Dan Lanning is staying in Oregon, and he is a great recruiter. So we will see where he ends up, and that's also closer in the area. You're playing some teams more that you know if you stay in that area. If you go from Washington to Oregon, So that may be more likely, but we'll see what Jabbar Muhammad does. But that's another one to keep an eye on. And finally, Jedd Fisch is hired to replace Kalen DeBoer at Washington. And this does affect Texas in a couple of different ways. It's the last piece of Texas news that is not fully fleshed out of what is happening. So in one way, it leads to the transfer portal now be open for 30 days in Arizona as a coaching change has been made. And the defensive coordinator from Arizona is now the linebackers / co-DC at Texas. And he could, if any of those players do decide to enter the transfer portal, guys like Jacob Manu, who's their leading tackler, linebacker, or Tacario Davis, the defensive back with 15 pass deflections, another good young player there. If one of those guys decides to get in the transfer portal because they want to go with Dwayne Akina or they want to go with Johnny Nansen, then maybe one of those guys ends up at Texas. On the flip of that, where we say all this stuff is two-sided, the hashtag that is put out by guys like Jacob Manu, Tacario Davis, is hashtag hire Nansen, that the linebackers coach that Texas hires is now thought to be at least the players want him to be sought after as the head coach for Arizona. So a position where he had left Arizona could end up, stepping up and saying, well, I went down from linebacker coach to co-DC, but if they do want to hire me to be a head coach, it's going to be hard for me to turn that position down. May go back to Arizona. None of that's we don't know yet. That is all pretty new stuff. The news came out yesterday, so I'm sure that he has been in talks with them, but that's something to keep an eye on as well, because if he decides to stay at Texas or they at Arizona decide to go a different way, some of these players really like Johnny Nansen. They are big fans of him, and it could be something where you see them trying to figure out if they have an opportunity to come to Texas, they may do that, or we may see that they get their way and Arizona says, let's keep the guy that everybody likes on that defense and bring him as our head coach. Those are both options, but a lot of stuff coming out for Texas over the weekend, from Jahdae Barron to Dwayne Akina to Isaiah Bond to Jabbar Muhammad to Jedd Fisch, and how that all affects Texas. A lot of news for a offseason that is still rolling right along. There is still a few other targets that Texas is looking at in the transfer portal, but again, we know the transfer portal continues to kick on because we've got almost 30 days more of Alabama. We've got almost 30 days more of Washington. We don't know with Harbaugh. We'll talk a little bit more about him in a little bit, but Harbaugh could be ending up in the NFL, and if Harbaugh ends up in the NFL, that opens 30 days at Michigan. We know there's 30 days at Arizona where Texas has ties. So none of this stuff is probably drying up anytime too soon. All right, let's give you a quick update on the NFL game. If you're watching that, I believe Pittsburgh just threw an interception, but they're saying it's down, maybe an incompletion, but our Buffalo is up 14-0 with 3:20 left in the first quarter, and it's a 4th and 9. They're going to get the ball back right here. Buffalo seeming to take it to Pittsburgh right now, and unless they turn it around, this may be a blowout that Pittsburgh was just not ready to get into the playoffs, and that's not that surprising. All right, we filibustered long enough to get into some Cowboys talk and the Packers and the Cowboys. And I know I want to hear you guys and what your takes are on this on the text line, 512-447-3776. You know, you've had a little bit more time to digest it now. You've been close to 24 hours to digest. I mean, especially if we're just going to say you could have been digesting 40 minutes into the game because it did not start well for the Cowboys. It did not go well. They were able to do some things offensively. Once the defense basically let off of them, they were able to start moving the ball a little bit better offensively. The defense never really came around in that game. The Cowboys lose 48-32. It was never really a game. At one point, the Packers are up 27-0. And it's never good. It's never good if you're a team and you have to have the argument which coach sucked more, which side of the ball sucked more. That's not a great side of the argument of, did it matter that the Dallas defense was sticking out light packages and putting 6+ DBs out there over and over again, even though Aaron Jones is running all down your throat. Aaron Jones does whatever he wants, goes for 118 yards and 3 touchdowns, and you're sticking to 6 DBs because you don't want to get burned by Jordan Love However, he still throws for 272 and 3 touchdowns, gets what he wants as well. Is that not a problem that you do sit look at that side of the ball and you go, well, Dan Quinn's clearly the problem because there are formulas to beat him. And whether it is he has tells where you can tell whether he's rushing and what he's doing, or how you can move the ball and divert attention the same way the Texans did, which we'll get to them in just a minute, the same way the Texans did against Myles Garrett is what the Packers did against the Cowboys to eliminate a guy like Micah Parsons from the equation because you're only using him in pass rush. And they're going to be able to move Jordan Love and chip on you and do whatever else to keep you further and less effective for the entire game. And I mean, really not effective at all. And then put you into a run game that you're not stopping the run game because you're still pass rushing the entire game. Is it Dan Quinn's fault? Is it Dan Quinn's fault that he could not get a stop and could not get them off the field? Or is it Mike McCarthy's fault? Because 27-0 still has a big 0 in front of it. It still has the ability that they started to adapt and they started to figure out this Packers defense. That, yeah, if you said, okay, well, if you hold them to 14-0, then maybe Dallas starts to figure it out and they get back, and you get a pick 6 in there, which you never want to see if you're the Cowboys, and it just ends poorly for you there, that your defense then gives up even more points in that 27-0, that they gave up more. You don't want to see that. But at the end of the day, the reality is that the Cowboys had some major flaws that everybody knew, flaws in defending the run and running the football, things that are big in championship football, big in playoff football. Those flaws that did never seem to be addressed, flaws that not trying to acquire somebody at the trade deadline, not trying to go out and find other linebacking help. And I know Demo got hurt. Overshawn got hurt. That's not good. You wanted him. I know Van Der Esch got hurt. But let's not pretend that half the people were okay if Van Der Esch didn't get re-signed in the offseason. And he's that valuable that he's the reason you lose in a first-round game. There's just too many problems on this Dallas team that were evident from the preseason through the end of the season, and they were never addressed. And it goes back to what the problem with the Cowboys on a multiple levels is the Cowboys are never going to be a team that goes all in or feels the need to go all in. They did not progress as the season went on. This is a Cowboys team that was the same Cowboys team week 1 as they were week 17. And they were good week 1. So they said, well, we're good. We can do these things. But they never found a run game. They got better at running. They never found a run game, though. It wasn't like Tony Pollard is having 100-yard rushing games. It's never like they ran him 20 times a game like Mike McCarthy said they should at the end of last season. That was Kellen Moore's whole problem. They ran the ball less because it was less effective. But Dak was playing better. So you kept going. But that was what you had week 1, and you had week 18. You had the same team. Defensively, you knew you got killed in some games, but those were fluke games. Week 1, week 18, same defense. And you look at a Packers team that grew and got better and had confidence because they were getting better and they didn't believe they were entitled to anything. Whereas the Cowboys world, you get entitled a little bit more. You're the Cowboys. You're the underdog because they're getting mad at you, but you're good enough. And I'm not saying they don't work hard. That's silly to say they don't work hard. Of course they do. Not saying they didn't practice hard, but I'm saying the game plan from a coach like Mike McCarthy is not going to be to get his guys riled up, to remind the Dallas Cowboys that nothing's a given in the NFL, nothing's a given in the playoffs. It's to go out there and to play our game, and if we play our game, we'll beat anybody. We'll beat anybody. And when you play your game and we'll beat anybody, it's hard to progress during the season because you don't try different things. You don't change up to play different defenses, and you don't put in new plays throughout the season to try and get in. And I'm sure Mike McCarthy put in a few new plays during the season. I don't want to, dumb him down to that level, but you really tried to play Dallas Cowboys football week after week. And by the time you got to Wild Card Weekend, Dallas Cowboys football was the same as it was week 1. And you were able to, as a coach, break down the footage and look at the Arizona games and look at every game in the Shanahan tree and say, okay, what are those guys doing where they're able to get impact on this team, and where are they able to get their points? And Matt LaFleur put together a great game plan, a really great game plan on both sides of the ball. The Packers coaching staff put together a great game plan. And Dallas went out trying to play their style of football, got punched in the mouth, and it ends up not being surprising that the team couldn't get up for it, was not up for it, didn't get up for it, couldn't get up for it. And while they tried to step up later in the game, neither the offense or the defense felt the pressure and the intensity that it was a playoff game. They treated it the same way they treated week 1 through week 18. They went out there, and they never turned it on, and they never got big on it. You never saw the intensity on anybody's face. You saw them just get beat by a team that wanted it more. Because the Cowboys wanted to win a Super Bowl, but they didn't want to win that week because it was week 1, week 18, and we'll get that Super Bowl, and we'll win that. We'll be up for the Super Bowl. But you got to get there. It just never felt like that team had that drive in them. It never felt like they were led in the way. It felt like they were led in the way that Jerry Jones leads this team, which is we are the Dallas Cowboys. You present yourself because we are the Dallas Cowboys and not we're a team in the NFL and we need to go win the game. You can look at the fact that Dak Prescott had one of his worst games of the season, threw that pick 6, threw 2 picks in the game. He threw for 400 yards and 3 touchdowns, but again, we know that 400 yards and 3 touchdowns can be eradicated pretty quickly by turnovers. We know if you can't score in the red zone, that cost multiple teams. The Rams lost because they couldn't score in the red zone. You know, the Dolphins couldn't score in the red zone. I mean, they didn't get there very often, but they couldn't either. The Browns couldn't score in the red zone. These teams couldn't, when teams can't score in the red zone, and Dallas had that problem all year long. Same team, week 1, week 18, same team. It just ends up being a problem that you have that the Cowboys end up losing. And where do you go from here if you're the Dallas Cowboys? And we'll get into that more as the weeks go on. I've been a proponent of firing Mike McCarthy for a while. I don't know why I should stop now. I get it's a bit of an overreaction. I get you got to find that someone else out there who's better. Personally, I think Mike Vrabel's a better coach. Personally, I think Bill Belichick's a better coach. Personally, I think if Mike Tomlin's available after this, I think he's a better coach. I think there's at least 3 that are out there. I don't know if you're going to get Bill Belichick because I don't know if you're going to let him do the shopping for the groceries. But this is a Cowboys team that I think needs change. I think they need to bring somebody in who does have a little bit of fire and intensity to go shake it up. I think Dan Quinn had some of that. But he seemed to get complacent by the end, and maybe that is because of the other job offers. Maybe that's because of all that. But it ends up being the Cowboys lose to the Packers. So I want to get your takes on the text line on that. Of course, everything about the Cowboys and the Packers. Get your opinion because, look, we've had 24 hours to kind of stomach what happened, and all of it just seemed like every single problem the Cowboys had, the Packers knew and went after, and the Cowboys had no answer, even though those have been problems that we've talked about since early in the season. On the flip of that, the Browns and the Texans turns out the way you want. Browns 14, Texans 45. C.J. Stroud misses 5 passes in the entire game, goes 16 for 21 for 274 and 3 touchdowns. You see a team that wanted to run the ball. They have not gotten to the point where they're running the ball more, but I don't know if that was ever their game plan the way it was for the Cowboys or allegedly was for the Cowboys. Devin Singletary, though, 5.1 yards per carry. Gets 66 yards on 13 carries, 5.1 yards per carry. If you're averaging 5.1, you're doing pretty good. And in reality, there was one guy who played a really good game on that Cleveland Browns defense, the JOK. He came out there and continued to sniff out the runs. And, if you take him out of that game for the Browns, it could have been a worse game for the Browns. He played an amazing game. But the Browns they didn't have the matchup. Joe Flacco's turnovers were as deadly as you could possibly have. 2 turnovers in a game that lead to an immediate 14 points. That is just brutal when it was not out of question at that point, and they're able to put the game away with 2 back-to-back pick sixes. C.J. Stroud, the Texans, the fact that they still have something to prove, that they went out there with that attitude, they all have something to prove, that no one believes in them. They did have that underdog philosophy while still being out there and play their game. It's fun. It was fun to watch. There was some PTSD. There was some PTSD as a Houston sports fan, a Houston football fan, that there's some PTSD that you get up 24 points in a game and you think, oh, God, how are we going to blow this one? Joe Flacco's really going to come back on us? But, man, Texans took care of business. they're looking good going into next week. Now you're going to play, most likely looking at what the score is right now in Buffalo, you're most likely going to go play a Baltimore team. That's going to be a very uphill battle. The Ravens are just a much better team than overall than the Browns are. The offense is much better, so you're going to have a bigger struggle on that side of the ball to keep up there. They don't have a Myles Garrett, but that won't matter at the end of the day. If you can get some other pressure and you can bring more options and you can kind of for a team like Micah Parsons, where you could run away from him, and Myles Garrett, where you could run away from him, it makes it a little bit easier. I think the Ravens have more options on that defensive end, but we'll see with that, and we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Also, the Dolphins can't handle it, can't ever get the ball rolling. Dolphins lose the Chiefs 7-26. They only have 14 carries in the game by running backs. You can't play in a freezing cold game. It's negative degrees in Kansas City, and you don't run the ball more. 39 passing attempts in a game like that. It's the way the team was built. I think that's young coaching from Mike McDaniel. And as he progresses as a coach, they will get better. I think the bigger story out of this is it seems like Rashee Rice has stepped up, and maybe, just maybe, the Chiefs have their wide receiver. They've got their number one now. And so if you have Travis Kelce and Rashee Rice, that this is a Chiefs team that could now start to make a bigger run with the way that defense plays. That's starting to be a little scary. How good Rashee Rice looked in this game. And finally, the Rams lose to the Lions 24-23, and that game, really fun game, but red zone, not being able to get the plays in. Sean McVay took a team that overproduced with them. We saw a team that came back from injuries this season and put up a good fight, but it was great to watch the Lions fans get that victory. It'll be fun to watch the Lions. I still don't have a ton of faith in this Lions team, but it was fun to watch them get a win last night. Finally, a little last note to put in there. In the Harbaugh sweepstakes, the Jim Harbaugh sweepstakes, the apparent first team to call out and talk to him are the Chargers. Not a crazy fit there. A lot of talent on the Chargers. They're in win now mode. He is in win now mode. If you are not going to try and get Bill Belichick, I think Harbaugh is another great name to put in there to try and win now. I don't know if he's a guy who would have to try and build a franchise, but with all the talent that's there, what he might be able to bring in there defensively, what he can bring into a place with hard-nosed guys like a Bosa and a Mack, with a guy with the offense and all the weapons they have there, that for a Harbaugh who may not spend a long time there, because if he gets his Lombardi, who knows where he'll end up? Who knows if he goes back to college or if he goes somewhere else in the pros, if he takes him, who knows? And he may be okay just, rebuilding there afterwards. But it makes sense. He was a San Francisco guy, now he'd be an LA guy, go into that Chargers. It kind of makes sense, but we'll see as that builds up as well. Let's hit the big fat poll today, because I do want to get to the text line sooner rather than later today, because I do want to talk to you guys about the game. But let's hit the big fat poll, because it's going to be about the Cowboys. Of course it is.
Patrick's Big Fat Poll of the Day on the Horn.
512-447-3776. 512-447-3776. Easy question. Who should be the coach of the Cowboys next season? That's all we're asking you. Who should be the coach? Is it Mike McCarthy? You think, look, man, 12 wins. How can we bench him? How can we put him down? 12 wins. Is it Bill Belichick? You got to go give him and hand over the keys to the car. Tell Jerry to take a back seat. Let Bill Belichick does what he do. And I just imagine those last couple of years were kind of an anomaly, and Bill can still cook. Bill can still go do it. Do you go after Jim Harbaugh? Bring him in and say we're ready to win now, but we need a winner? Do you go and if the Packers look like they're going to lose today, the Steelers look like they're going to lose today, do you go and call up Pittsburgh and say we'll give you a draft pick? We'll give you something to go get our coach and get Mike Tomlin and bring a little toughness to a team that looks soft, a team that just didn't look like they were hard enough to go play? Maybe go bring in some toughness with Mike Tomlin? Is it another coach? Do you want to see a different way? You want to go younger? Tell me what you think. Who should be the next coach? Who should be the coach of the Cowboys? I won't say next coach. Who should be the coach of the Cowboys next season? Tell us on the text line, 512-447-3776. Any other takes, anything else you got for us, hit us up on the text line, 512-447-3776. We come back, we'll play some sound from Hook 'em Up with D and Rob B, talking about some good Texas news. We'll get into all that when we come back here on the Sports Complex in the Horn 1019, AM 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com. Back at the Sports Complex here on the Horn. I guess you could probably guess this one. That we're playing cold songs and ice songs and frozen songs and all that. As it's a very cold day here in Austin. So we're playing those all week long. Also, I always got to play Foreigner. My dog is named after Foreigner, named after the singer Lou Graham. It's how my dog got the name Lou. Because when I found him, it took 4 baths to get him clean. So he's named Lou because he's the dirty white boy. Which is another one of those great Foreigner songs you can go check out. But playing cold songs all week here on the Sports Complex. We're going to get to your text in just a little bit. 512-447-3776. I want you to sound off on the Cowboys, on the Texans, anything else you saw on all the great Texas news this weekend. And if you're worried at all of Johnny Nansen, getting hired by Texas, but maybe taking the Arizona head coaching job now. Maybe taking that off. Put that in there. All that. Talk that on the text line 512-447-3776, as well as a poll of the day. Who should be the coach of the Cowboys next season? Who should be the coach? But let's play some stuff. Rod Babers and Aaron Hogan go behind the burnt orange curtain this morning talking about that great Texas news. Here's some input from a man who played at Texas on a Hook 'em Up replay here on the Sports Complex.
All right, a lot of big news on the 40 acres. Let's talk about the things that we know that have already happened. Jahdae Barron did make an announcement via social media. It was a video that actually involved Michael Huff. Huff Daddy wasn't involved in it. So shout out to Huff Daddy. And I assume it's going to be a jersey change here. Not really sure because
7, yeah.
Yeah, Huff Daddy did give him this number 7 jersey, and then there was some theater about it. So I'm assuming that, and they had the Thorpe Award involved in it. So it's pretty cool. You should go check it out on social media. But anyway, the crux of the announcement essentially is that he's coming back to the 40 acres. So Jahdae Barron will return. We don't know exactly return and exactly how he's going to play the nickel back, or if he's going to play, some other position. Because Mukuba is coming in too. Mukuba can play nickel and safety. But it's really interesting to see. I think they should cross train him. I've been saying this for a while. I think the pitch for him to win the Thorpe, he's not going to just win the Thorpe because I don't know if he's going to make enough plays on the ball for them to just say, oh, yeah, he's going to be a Thorpe Award winner. I believe maybe this year he could have been a semifinalist. If he wants to win the Thorpe, the pitch has got to be he's the most versatile defensive back in the country. Period. That's the pitch. Because even if he doesn't make a lot of plays on the football and doesn't have a lot of splash plays, still you can show off his versatility week to week. And that alone, especially with now you have entities like Pro Football Focus, you have Sports Info Solutions, you have all these different, data-driven entities that will be able to figure out, oh man, this guy's playing a lot of different roles on the team, which he can do. He can play safety, which he's done sparingly at times. You played him at corner. You've played him at nickel mostly. I think you should move him around. And with the versatility now that you're bringing in, think about it. You're bringing in Mukuba, who's a versatile DB. Dabble says he can play any position in the secondary. I think Jahdae Barron can play any position in the secondary. I think Derek Williams, who's going to be your starting safety, can play safety and can play nickel. Those guys should be interchangeable as your 3 inside defensive backs, right? And I know that's kind of going toward a 3 safety defense, but it's not. It's just being able to be less rigid and more malleable defensively. When you're rigid and you have your nickel that has to play a certain role and has to be aligned a certain way in a certain coverage, that rigidity essentially gives off clues and hints to the offense about what coverage you're in, right, and what front you're in. And there are times which Jahdae Barron wouldn't travel in certain coverages. That's when teams got into manipulating matchups with the safeties, which formationally with 3-by-1 sets or with formation in the boundary, and to counter against that for Texas, you make your defensive backs, well, they're all malleable. They're all essentially interchangeable. They can play safety. They can play nickel. So there isn't a matchup disadvantage for them or a matchup advantage for the offense like you found this year. You guys, think about it. Late in the season, teams were picking on Jahdae Barron late just because they had figured out the rules of the defense based on the formation. They knew where his leverage was. They knew exactly what leverage he was going to play. They knew exactly what technique he was going to play. They knew the rules of the defense kind of based on his alignment. So his 2 worst games of the season were when? Oklahoma State and Washington. Well, and it wasn't because he's not a great player. It's because by then we know his skill set also, but we also know the rules he has to play by. And I think you can give the offense, I would say maybe misinformation by having defensive backs that are more malleable, that are interchangeable, instead of having, oh, your nickel has to play this alignment, this leverage, this technique in this coverage with this front all the time. And I just think that's why late in the season, I don't even think it was Jahdae Barron's fault a lot of the time. Some of it was because there were a lot of double moves and out and ups. But for a guy like Jahdae Barron, you want to sell him as a Thorpe Award finalist. I think by the way, I think he may be the most versatile DB in the country. He's definitely one of them. I think you sell that, and the way you do it is not only do you promote and you deploy and weaponize his versatility week to week based on the matchups, but then also I think you can do it with all of your inside defensive backs. I think they have that ability, Derek Williams and also Makuba, who you're bringing in. So that's how I would do it, and that's why I would sell it. I mean, if he comes back, he's going to make a lot of plays, but you're also going to have a narrative to sell. And that would be the narrative that I sell if I'm Texas.
Yeah, I think we've talked about 8 DBs moving on to the NFL or into the transfer portal. Pretty clear that Texas wanted to go a different direction, as you just talked about, in the type of defensive backs they deploy. And, when you just, take what you just said with versatility, with 3 safeties who can play multiple positions, 2 young corners in Terrence Brooks and Manny Muhammad, who you feel like, with another year of development are going to be really good outside corners.
They're going after this Jabbar Muhammad, too.
And they're
Malik
also
Muhammad's kinfolk, his cousin.
And Michael Taff. I mean, that's the beginnings of a pretty darn good secondary. And, that's the other development of the weekend on the portal side is that with Washington's coach Kalen DeBoer leaving to go to Alabama, Jabbar Muhammad, who we saw in the semifinal game, very aggressive player, wore number 1 for Washington, made some really nice plays against Texas, and he is cousin to Manny Muhammad.
Yes, he is.
Our friend Jerry Hamilton of On3 Sports reported that Longhorn coaches were in Dallas to meet with Muhammad as a portal prospect over the weekend. So keep an eye on that name. And then, then it came down yesterday, Rod, with the Isaiah Bond situation, the wide receiver.
It's big.
We've talked a lot here behind the burnt orange curtain and about Texas that they're overhauling their secondary. So, to get Andrew Makuba, a 3-year starter at Clemson on a really good defense, an experienced player from this area, to come back and then get Jahdae Barron to stay and stick, huge for the secondary. Then receiver, you're replacing almost all your catches and your explosiveness.
Yep.
Where were you going to find that? Well, Nick Saban up and retires last Tuesday, and pretty quickly the first player into the portal was their leading receiver, Isaiah Bond, and he's already committed to Texas after coming in for the weekend. Elite speed, Rod. He's out of Buford, Georgia.
Yeah.
At the highest level of high school football in Georgia, he won the 100-meter and the 200-meter as a junior in the track team in Georgia. So we know he's explosive and can run, and still developing as a wide receiver, but you're about to get him for his junior. He's coming here. He talked to Pete Thamel. Was it Pete Thamel? He talked to one of the recruiting insiders and basically said he's coming here. It's a business decision, not that he's making money from NIL, but that he wants to improve his draft stock. He wants, much like A.D. Mitchell, right? He wants to come in as a piece of a guy that is fast, and we know he's explosive, but he said he wants to improve his draft stock and put himself in a better position for the NFL, and feels like the Texas offense with Quinn Ewers and an experienced offensive line can give him that opportunity to showcase his skill.
Yeah, it was Pete Thamel. His quote was, just like the business world, you make the best decision for your company. My company right now is my draft stock. I feel like I'm putting myself in position to increase that and have better draft stock. He also said playing for Steve Sarkisian with quarterback Quinn Ewers were main attractions 100%. He said of Ewers, he's a great big-time pocket passing quarterback. He's a top pick in the draft next year. I'm also going to be a top pick. It's going to be a great duo. So yeah, I mean and that's part of the sales pitch for Texas. And they're replacing probably 80% of their overall passing game. If you look at the JT Sanders in there with the 3 wide receivers that are leaving, with the transfer portal guys, with Jonathan Brooks that's leaving, and yet it became something that was it went from being an area of concern and anxiety for Longhorn fans, and in probably a week's time now with Isaiah Bond, Matthew Golden now thrown in the mix as well, and you got a young Jonte Cook who's going to be, obviously I think he's going to be a great receiver too. And Ryan Wingo, young guys coming in via the recruiting class. I mean, you got 2 4-stars and 2 5-stars now that are look to be the top 4 front runners to be in the rotation of wide receiver. If I have to pick 4 guys to be in that circle of trust that I talk about with Sark, because he doesn't like a heavy rotation of wide receivers. It's going to be a really tight rotation of wide receivers. It'll probably be, right now, I think it'll be Jonte Cook, Matthew Golden, Isaiah Bond, and I'd take a young Ryan Wingo.
He or DeAndre Moore likely to emerge as the receivers for Texas.
All those guys have elite traits and skills. They're NFL wide receivers, in my opinion.
And then you wonder if a guy like Savion Red continues to evolve as his Swiss Army knife kind of player, right? That running back, Wildcat, or Red Cat as we called it. Plus, he played receiver his first year. Could he kind of fill that Jordan Whittington physical kind of player role? We'll see. However, Sark, but he does have pieces to play with in the game.
Seems like he's going with explosive speed, right? All these guys have that kind of commonality. Isaiah Bond, you talked about his top end speed. Jonte Cook's a guy. He's all around, but he can hit a top end speed on you. Yeah. Matthew Golden's explosive, right? He was one of the best kick returners in the country because that guy in space, he can be a problem. And I think it feels like that's where Sark is going. He wants more speed on the field.
Well, and
Ryan Wingo is a guy. Yeah.
And Ryan Wingo also brings speed with size.
Yes.
Right? And
you're run after the catch.
Probably looking to replace a little bit of that A.D. Mitchell and a size, right? They can go up and win the contested catches plays, the one-on-one balls. But good stuff right there. So Isaiah Bond is in. Jahdae Barron coming back to join Andrew Makuba, his buddy, from the 5-1-2, and then we'll get to the Dwayne Akina story and where it stands. It's not official.
It's not official yet, but I think
good.
I think it will be official. I think it will be done, and it's but
we'll talk about what that impact can be when it does become official. But we'll also say this: it's good when you talk about your portal players. The Longhorns have now added, by my count, 4 players in the portal or 5. 4, 5. They've lost 13 in the portal so far.
Yeah.
Charles Wright, by the way, the Longhorn former quarterback, committed to Appalachian State over the weekend.
You're right. You're right. 4, because it's Trey Moore, Makuba, Matthew Golden,
and now Isaiah Bond. Yeah, those are your 4.
You're right. You're 4.
And I saw a tweet from Matt Miller, who is the ESPN draft scout.
Yeah.
When you're bringing in players through the portal who the draft guys are already looking at, I mean, that's the third one. I mean, when you're talking about those draft guys build their top 100 board, Andrew Makuba's already on it for next year. Yeah. Isaiah Bond's already on it. And then Trey Moore is already on it.
Yeah.
So if the NFL draft guys are going, oh, man, these guys, the Longhorns are not just picking up dudes. They're picking up production guys that we're watching. That's pretty good because all those guys are coming here to play in bigger spotlight games and improve their draft stock.
Yeah.
If Jahdae Barron wants to be the Thorpe Award winner, Andrew Makuba probably like to be in the conversation about the Thorpe Award too.
Yeah.
Potentially. So and improve his draft stock. Both of those guys will be jockeying for that conversation. And then Isaiah Bond wants to replace Xavier Worthy as maybe the go-to receiver at Texas. And Trey Moore bring that edge rusher that Texas has been lacking, who can get to the quarterback. Had 14 and a half sacks for UTSA last year, plus Matthew Golden, an impact player both at receiver and on special teams.
Good stuff there from Hook 'em Up with Ian Ryby. Weekday morning, 6 to 11, right here on The Horn. All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to get to the text line, 512-447-3776. Poll of the day, who should be the coach of the Cowboys next season? Tell us who you got. Tell us who you think it should be. Someone we all know, Bill Belichick, Mike Tomlin, Mike Vrabel, Jim Harbaugh. Someone maybe not be thinking about. You want to go try and steal from the Texans and get Bobby Slowick and bring some youth in there? Another young guy, Ben Johnson from the Lions, somebody like that. Do you want to bring that in? Do you want to go completely off the rails? You just want to bring back Jimmy Johnson? What do you want to do? 512-447-3776. What do you guys want to have on? Who do you want to be the coach of the Cowboys? Or maybe just Mike McCarthy. Maybe this is we're all overreacting on a Monday. Is it Mike McCarthy? Let us know there. And any other takes on the game, any other takes on the weekend for Texas football, any other week for Texas basketball. We'll get to that in the 5 o'clock. Let us know. 512-447-3776 is the text line on a MLK Day show here of the Sports Complex. Right back on the Sports Complex in the Horn 1019, AM 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com. Back on the Sports Complex here on the Horn. Text line's open, 512-447-3776. Steelers trying to get on the board. Oh, they're not going to be able to do it. Buffalo goes for a field goal. Steelers block the field goal, but cannot get the pickup and run back, which may be one of the only ways that Buffalo would be, or Pittsburgh would be able to score in this game. But yes, Buffalo is up 21-0 right now on Pittsburgh after a blocked field goal attempt. I don't know if that's the kicker who was got up and hobbling and walking off for Buffalo. Would be a problem. Maybe he didn't want to make a tackle, but he is coming up short. I don't know if that's the punter or the kicker or the holder who ends up coming up short, but probably a loss there for the Bills on a blocked field goal. Not a play where you want to see an injury happen if you are a Bills fan. All right. Let's get to the text line, 512-447-3776. We're asking you who should be the coach of the Cowboys next season, any other takes. And I see a trend on the text line. We'll see if it continues through the 5 o'clock hour. By the way, I appreciate you guys tuning in on a MLK day where I know a lot of people are having the day off. I know a lot of people may not be trying to be on the roads today because of the conditions. But I appreciate you being with me, whether you're working like I am or whether you're just having a day off and still tuning in. We appreciate you here on the Horn tuning in. Texter said, first of all, Nate did say before the show started, take it easy, PD. I'm happy for you. So I appreciate you, Nate. I understand if you don't want to listen to sports radio today. I know sometimes I don't want to after big losses. So I get it. I'm not going to be, I wasn't too mean on them. They just sucked. They need to make some changes. They didn't all season. So off season will be the time to do it now. Texter says, breaking news, the Dallas Cowboys have hired a new coach. Coach Jerry Jones will take the official title of head coach. I see that one. Another texter said, just sent in Jerry Jones to answer the question of who will be the next coach. I do see that a couple people really going on board with the Jerry Jones hatred, which I get. And I'll tell you what, we'll go more into that as the season goes, as we continue the show today. The Jerry Jones hatred, which is not wrong. Jerry Jones is definitely part of the problem. He's definitely there's definitely a factor of Jerry Jones not being, of being too hands-on in this organization and not having football people, and then his own ego and drafting Deuce Vaughn so he can get on TV, and Deuce Vaughn doesn't play all season long, but he wants to get in the documentary and have the feel-good moment of giving it, so he drafts Deuce Vaughn instead of getting a running back at a different point in the draft where he should have. He then doesn't sign another running back because he wants to show that he was right, that they should have kept Zeke because he wanted to keep his buddy. He wanted to keep his friend Zeke Elliott, so he doesn't sign a guy there. He does not make big acquisitions. And in reality, I think the biggest problem that he has running the team and not having someone else do it is they'll never go all in. And sometimes you have to make those big moves in those big, risky things. I mean, if you just look at the Texans making a big, risky decision to trade up and give up a first-round draft pick to get Will Anderson in the trade they made, that's something that a lot of teams wouldn't do. And it's something that a owner would usually never do, because if you're owning the team and running the team and you know you have no intention to sell, you don't want to leverage your future to have 3 or 4 or 5 more bad seasons. And Jerry remembers when he leveraged his future before to try and win and trying to keep the drives alive in the late 90s, and how it turned out in the down years for the Cowboys and the Quincy Carter years and all of that, where they were competitive but not really, and they took forever to get back on their feet. And I don't think he wants to do that. He doesn't want to give up his draft picks. He likes picking on the draft day. He likes having that, so he doesn't want to give up his picks. He doesn't like getting rid of his players. He doesn't like doing free agency. There's a lot of problems with Jerry Jones, but I will add into that, I have a problem with Mike McCarthy letting every player get drafted that he was getting drafted. Wasn't his decision. He didn't draft Deuce Vaughn. That's a Jerry Jones pick. Why was Mozzie Smith the first guy drafted? Yeah, they need a defensive tackle, sure, but why is Mike McCarthy not fighting for his guys? Why is he not getting guys on the offensive end? Why is he not getting a running back? Why is he not making the offensive decisions? It feels like Mike McCarthy was letting Jerry Jones do everything he wanted, and he goes, I'll win with those players. And you can't have that. You have to have somebody who at least wants to go in and try and convince Jerry of what to do, who wants to go in there and put up the work to convince Jerry that this is the right way to do it, and whether you have to convince him by making it seem like his own idea or what you got to do, that's what you want in a coach. It doesn't feel like Mike McCarthy's ever been that guy. Feels like Mike McCarthy's happy to be the coach. He's happy to coach the games. He's happy to be hands-off in other areas, and you can't do that if you're the Cowboys head coach, even though Jerry Jones wants it to be. You can't do that because you understand Jerry's not a football guy as much as he wants to be. And he's in the Hall of Fame. He's everything else, but he's not a ex-football player who sits there and knows the ins and outs the ways he needs to. He's also a much older guy, which makes it harder to judge how the game is moved. It's just hard. It passes you by at a point. And how can you go back and look at the changes of the game? He has to look at those. So, yes, it is Jerry Jones' fault, but it's Mike McCarthy's fault. It's Dan Quinn's fault. It's every player on that team who couldn't get up for a playoff game because they thought they already won it. It's everyone's fault. So, as much as we can go on Jerry Jones, and it's an easy target, it is everyone's fault. My man Chan says, Green Bay, baby, the Jerry J curse lives on. It's karma. Go Texans. Green Bay's defense kept everything in front and forced Dallas offense to be patient. They did keep guys in front. They did try and take away explosive plays. If you look at explosive plays, I think Dallas had 2. I think they had 2 explosive plays, maybe 3, and Green Bay kept getting them over and over again, which you just can't allow. You can't allow consistent explosive plays because they're demoralizing. They're beating on you, and it just, as much as Dallas wants to, be able to go in front, then you have to have a run game. If they had a run game and could run effectively for 5-6 yards a carry with a couple backs and change it up and just beat them down and run the ball 25 times a game, then maybe Green Bay doesn't get out to that big lead up front. You're able to put up some points. Texture says, I hate the Cowboys. Keep McCarthy. He's the best thing they could do for the rest of the league. Just some Cowboys hating today. I'm not Cowboys hating. I feel bad. I didn't like it. I didn't like watching that game. I mean, I'm a Texans fan, but I was rooting for the Cowboys. I didn't want to see them be this bad again. And I didn't want to be right about Mike McCarthy. I wanted to be proven wrong that Mike McCarthy could get his team to win a big game and could do that. He couldn't. And we're still not going to see it. We know that Jerry Jones is for, he's trying to give the 24-hour rule before he does anything rash. He's not going to fire Mike McCarthy in the moment, but he's definitely looking at it right now. He's definitely looking and seeing if there's a better option out there. I'm sure that those Dak conversations are changing, but we'll see after 24 hours what'll happen next. We're going to take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll give you another update here on the Steelers and the Bills game. We'll get into some basketball talk as well, recap the top stories from Texas football, and more of your text, 512-447-3776, here on the Sports Complex on the Horn 1019, AM 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com. Back on the sports complex here on the Horn. Sorry, thought I had to sneeze there. Had to take a break. Thought I had to sneeze. Hour 2 on the sports complex. We'll get into some basketball talk and Texas and how bad that game was. And so more negativity. I don't like the negativity on a Monday, but it has to exist when the Cowboys lose and the Longhorns lose and everyone's upset. Give you some updates on some NBA scores as well as they're playing all day long. Talk a little NBA with you and more Texas football. We'll get into that, clear that up. Give you a score here, a score update here in a minute from the Steelers and Bills, but this one looks to be somewhat in hand. Let's say miraculous second half. And, of course, more of your text messages. 512-447-3776 is the text line. 512-447-3776 is the text line. The poll of the day, who should be the coach in Dallas next season? You can say Mike McCarthy, but there's a lot of other names, and there's some good coaches that don't have jobs right now. There's another one who's probably going to lose today, may be available in a trade. I don't think he's getting fired, but it may be available in a trade. So let us know on that. 512-447-3776. Who should be the coach of the Cowboys next season? Some other pieces of news to recap our Texas football. Just to give you an update, if you missed out on the news over the weekend, Jahdae Barron is returning to Texas. He was the last name that was questionable to enter the draft. Has not said that he was coming back to Texas. Did this weekend. Jahdae Barron coming back to help solidify that secondary. Also helping solidify the secondary. Reportedly, Dwayne Akina is going to be coming back to Texas. He'd worked with Johnny Nansen, who got hired at Texas a few weeks ago or a few days ago. It all merges together now and blends together. The defensive coordinator from Arizona, he was working for him there. He's now the linebackers and co-DC at Texas. Dwayne Akina, who had a long history at Texas, could be coming back to Texas. Reportedly is coming back to Texas, but I have not seen the official on that yet. As an analyst, to help out some young guys, including Jahdae Barron, maybe getting them ready for the next level. And this new guys that are coming in the secondary is great news there. Isaiah Bond, the top wide receiver target in the transfer portal from Alabama, the number one the receiver in receptions at Alabama last season, hit the portal right after the Nick Saban news, and he is now headed to Texas to solidify that wide receiver core with Matthew Golden transferring in, and then you add in Cook and some other players. This wide receiver core, they are reloading with Quinn Ewers coming back as well. They're talking to Jabbar Muhammad as well, the defensive back out of Washington, who is in the transfer portal, cousin of Manny Muhammad, Malik Muhammad, who is another DB for Texas, standout freshman DB for Texas. That is all in the news. And with the news of Jedd Fisch, the Arizona coach, heading to Washington to replace Kalen DeBoer, that now means that they are looking for a head coach. One of the names coming up, at least from the players, is Johnny Nansen, the guy we just talked about, the DC from Arizona who came to Texas. His name is now in the running for the head coach. At least the players believe so. So that'll be a question to figure out if Texas can keep him, or if Arizona tries to hire him back, or does hire him back. What will Texas do with the linebacker position after losing Bo Davis? That would be a big blow on the defense and co-defensive coordinator, all of that. But we will see what happens with that as that continues to unfold. And if he does not take that job, do the players that are putting out the hashtag hire Nansen, do they maybe enter the portal and maybe look over here? They have some good players on that roster that could be a help to Texas. Jacob Manu, linebacker, led the team in tackles. Tacario Davis, defensive back, 15 pass deflections, one of the better defensive backs. They have some safeties. They got some linebackers. I don't know if they have the D-line help that you'd like to have. I don't know if they have the big guys down there, but some good players, and maybe none of them enter in the portal. I'm not advocating for everyone to jump in the portal every time. I appreciate the guys who stayed at Texas, so I'm not advocating that. However, if they do, might have a home here. Just saying. Give you an update in the Steelers and the Bills game. The Bills are up 21-7, have pretty much dominated this game, but Pittsburgh does get on the board at the end of the half to make it 21-7 at halftime in that game. At least making them have to come out in the second half and try and put up some scores and all of that. So we'll get into more of that as we go on. Do want to talk some basketball with you. Over the weekend, Texas does lose to West Virginia, 76-73, and it's a road game, but that is no excuse to lose to a West Virginia team that is just not very good this year. They didn't play well in this game either, and they still beat Texas. They had some players that played better, but they are guys that shouldn't have, been able to come up and beat up on you, like Sumonic shouldn't have been able to come up and beat up on you, but he did. But it was not a great game. Not a great game for Texas against West Virginia. This is a West Virginia team with Bob Huggins' retirement, where he resigned and said he didn't. That a lot of guys hit the transfer portal. A lot of guys left this team. They really have had to rebuild quickly. Did not get the best players. And they have some decent. It's not like they're not a competitive team, but they should not have beaten Texas even on the road. You can look at some of these numbers that they shot in the first half, and they shot better in the second half. The Texas did, even though they played worse in the second half. They were shooting 30% from three. Was just not a good first half. Caden Shedrick was not really a factor. Only played about 3.5 minutes in this game. Put up one shot. Picks up 2 fouls, though. They just fouled him nonstop. And I get, as much as we got worried about the Big 12 officials screwing Texas during the football season, I think that's something to be watching during the basketball season. I don't expect it to be this way, but so far in Big 12 play, Texas has picked up fouls at an alarming rate, and I don't always agree with the calls. I know everyone's just kind of running into them at this point, and Texas players are playing so far back near the basket that they're just basically running right at them and getting the foul calls. It's brutal. West Virginia shot 41 free throws in the game. You can't allow a team to shoot 41 free throws. Texas shoots 22, so it's not like they weren't getting to line, or 21, sorry. So it's not like they weren't getting there, but, they shot almost double the amount of free throws you shot at 21. That's a crazy number. You can't allow that. And then you turn the ball over 22 times in the game as well. You only have 7 assists in the game. IT Horton has not played well in a couple weeks now. Brock Cunningham hasn't hit a shot in Big 12 play. He's hit free throws, but not a field goal in Big 12 play. Dylan DeSue has a decent game, 18 points. Max Asmus puts up 32. And I get, without Max Asmus, you're not in the game, but a lot of these were garbage minute, like at the end of the game. They're not garbage time because technically you got back into the game. But they were, just shooting threes. The offense looked just terrible. Just terrible in this game. And it was disappointing. It was disappointing to watch because they were never in place. They never felt like they got going. And yeah, the shooting was really bad in the first half. So they kind of just kept giving it to Max Asmus and letting him go do it. But this was a team of hand a guy a ball and let him go make plays. Texas is not a super talented team like that where they have enough guys, where they have 2 or 3 one and done players where they can go out, or guys that are at that level. Max Asmus is good, but Max Asmus is still going to do that on 9 of 17. He's, just decent. 7 of 13 from 3. Again, a lot of those were late in the game. But you need to get those guys to get everyone involved, to get more support from everybody involved. You lose the battle of the bench 25-9. You can't have that. You can't have it to where your bench is completely, invalidated. That, Zirko Inma and Kendall Weaver are trying to, get up a couple points, but IT Horton does nothing for you. I think Shedrick, once he gets healthy, maybe you have to shut him down for a couple weeks or whatever to get him back to where he can get in the game. I don't know why he was, if he's not ready to go out there, if he's going to continue to get hurt, you can't keep putting him in there. But he needs to be able to get in there and play some time with Dylan DeSue, and those guys need to be in the starting lineup. I like Brock Cunningham, but at this point, you're diminishing returns. People are getting used to playing him, and I think using him off the bench as energy and getting that second unit a little bit better would be better used for Brock Cunningham at this point. I know you can't – there's no one else to put in there. I'm not saying start Yinma because I like him off the bench too, but I'm saying Caden Shedrick needs to be that guy eventually. But 22 turnovers to start off with is just – you can't do that. That's Texas, when they're not trying to find an offense, is dribbling into trouble and then throwing the ball away because they dribble into trouble. And then 28 fouls, man. 28 fouls. At what point do you start trying to change up what you're doing on the court? And I get people can go on Rodney Terry. I'm not a Rodney Terry hater. I think Rodney Terry's a heck of a coach. I think that this is one where Texas is continuing to believe that things are going to work out in their favor, and they're not. They're not. The way they're playing defense, they're not getting calls. Whether that is because people don't like the way they're playing, or whether it's, it's something that's more nefarious. I think you have to start changing it up and trying to find better ways to play defense, to let guys get to the rim a little bit more. I know you want to be a tougher team and get in there and bump around inside, but if they're just going to keep running into you in the post with big guys and keep getting those calls, you have to do more. Dylan Disu started to do it a little bit better in the end of the game. When he get bumped, he pulled the chair out. But, I mean, there's not a lot you can learn from this game because everything about it you played poorly. So there's not a lot where you can walk out at the end of the day and say, well, it was bad, but no, it was bad. That's it. So what you can learn from this game is you can never come out and put up that kind of performance ever again. And I won't put it on Max Abmas. I won't put it on Dylan Disu. Dylan Mitchell, he's got to figure out where they're using him. They're putting him out on the 3-point line, and guys are playing 6-7 feet off him now. Take the 3. We know you can hit it. I mean, you haven't shot it well in games, but he won't shoot it. You have to start shooting and hitting that shot if you're Dylan Mitchell, because it's taking away every other part. You have to be able to hit that shot, or at least take it. There's just a lot of things after watching that game that was disappointing, to say the least, for Texas basketball. They have a game coming up on Wednesday versus a UCF team at home that they need to turn some things around and start playing better. But this is team basketball. If you're relying on Max Abmas and Dylan Disu to put up 40 a game, 50 a game, they put up, 60 points in this game? 50 points in this game? 50 points for Abmas and Dylan Disu? 50 out of your 73 with 2 players? You can't rely on that. You need to be able to have at least 30 to 40 coming off the rest of your team, and Texas needs to find a way to do that. But that will be continued growth. It's early. This is a Texas team that grew a lot last season, so we'll see if they continue to grow in this one. Elsewhere in the Big 12, Kansas was able to handle Oklahoma. Oklahoma's starting to show some weakness after getting into Big 12 play. Hunter Dickinson puts up 24 points and 14 rebounds for Kansas. Kansas beats Oklahoma 78-66. Baylor gets a win over Cincinnati, 72-59. They held Baylor to 5 for 20 from 3. They did some good things pretty well against Baylor, but Baylor just too experienced at the end of the day to get over Cincinnati. Texas Tech pulls out a win against Kansas State. They were down 9 with 4:30 left. It looked like K-State had pretty much had control most of the game, but Texas Tech just is able to get it done at the end of the season. That is a team with a lot of heart and a lot of intensity. They're able to get another win and stay undefeated in Big 12 play. And Houston gets another loss against TCU, 68-67. TCU shot threes extremely well, 53%. They shot a lot of free throws as well. They move on and knock Houston down, where Houston is not necessarily looking like the power they've been the last few years. All right, text line's open, 512-447-3776 is the text line number. I see a text says, I saw a post online talking about the Texans have more playoff wins since their inception than the Cowboys. A lot of Cowboys fans under 35 immediately started saying, oh, well, the Texans don't have any Super Bowls. My question is for you. If you cannot remember the Super Bowl win for your team, can you really even brag about it? Yeah, you can, because sports are stupid and you can do that. But you can say, yeah, the Cowboys historically, because Steelers fans will talk about games before them and everybody will. I mean, you can say, well, since the Texans have been founded, you guys have sucked too. We've been better than you since both teams existed. The Texans are a better team historically. But they've also had some lower lows in the Cowboys, which goes into the entire problem of the Cowboys. The Cowboys sit in the middle because they never go all in. And if you go all in, there's a peak and a valley. They don't want that. They want to remain in the black the entire time. They want to remain a solid team that's competitive. That's what they want to do. And if they're going to do that, it's going to cost them. And it's going to cost them by not having another running back in there that could be able to pace the game as the Packers are dominating you and stopping you getting over the top and make them change where their resources are. It's going to stop you from going out and getting another linebacker when you need some more linebacker help, or changing up and getting more defensive minds. And it's going to hurt you from, letting coaches have ease of letting a Mike McCarthy bring in all his friends and not bring in a bunch of, dissenting opinions that maybe make you think differently. Those are the types of things you don't get, where in Houston, they've had to have a lot of change and a lot of growth because of what they've done in the bad times in there. Phil the Thrill says, time to clean house in Dallas. Game was never in doubt. Worst playoff loss in Cowboy history. Even Tom Landry is rolling over in his grave. No, Green Bay has won more playoff games at AT&T Stadium than the Cowboys. Oh yeah, and a Super Bowl. Yeah, so I don't know if it's clean house because in the NFL today, it's very hard to completely clean house. But I'll say you let Dan Quinn take another head coaching job. That's fine at this point. You may need to move on from that. I like Dan Quinn, but he's clearly got his tells. And when he gets beat bad. Like, there is no middle ground for Dan Quinn. He's either the best DC in the game or he is by far the worst. And I've never been a huge Mike McCarthy fan. I didn't ever think that he was going to be a guy to get you to that point. So I'm fine with getting rid of him. And we just talked about it, Chan. Are you concerned about Texas men's basketball? Concerned? I would say I'm concerned. I'm not in panic mode at all right now about Texas men's basketball, but concern definitely feels like a valid thing because there is a point of it where, you see trends that guys like IT Horton not being able to play at a higher level, that he is continuing to not grow. That's an issue that you're more concerned about. The fact that Shedrick cannot seem to stay on the court right now. That's something you worry about a little bit more. Is that injury? Is he not going to be able to ever get into the place where you need him to be? There are some concerns there, but I'm definitely not in panic mode yet because I think they can turn it around and finish strong in the season. But you definitely want to see them come out against UCF and you want to see the fight in this team that they're not going to let it go. You want to be able to see Dylan Dessou and Tyrese Hunter take leadership. Tyrese Hunter did not have a good game at all there and kind of disappeared in that game against West Virginia too. You want us to be able to see those guys step up and take leadership. Some quick notes from the NBA. A lot of games happening today. They do a lot for MLK Day, celebrating MLK Day. The NBA definitely tries to make this a day about them. I'm sure they were not thrilled that there was two NFL games today. We did see an early game. The Rockets lose to the 76ers 124-115. Embiid puts up 41 points in that game. Spurs fought back against Atlanta by being behind very badly, down 35 at one point in this game. They lose by 10, 99-109 is the score in Atlanta as they win. Victor Wembanyama puts up 26 points all in the second half, but Trae Young has a great performance, 36 points, 6 rebounds, 13 assists for Trae Young. No Luka Doncic for the Mavs today, and they still pull out a victory against the Pelicans. So a good victory there for the Dallas Mavericks against the Pelicans. Without Luka Doncic, Dallas wins 125-120 in that game. We get a box score as I pull it up on my phone, and we will get so many scores. Zion Williamson goes off for 30 points in that game. Tim Hardaway Jr., 41. Kyrie Irving, 42. A monster effort by those two guys that are trying to step up with the absence of Luka Doncic. Both those guys play better without Luka. I know it's not playing better. They just score a lot more points because Luka does not have the ball. He's a huge usage rate. Those guys combined for 83. Tim Hardaway Jr. and Kyrie Irving as the Mavs get a win against the Pelicans. Also of note, Draymond Green expected to finally make his return today against the Grizzlies. He is picking a poor, beat-up, sad team. Desmond Bane now out. Expect to be reevaluated in 6 weeks. Marcus Smart is out. We know John Morant is out. Jaren Jackson Jr. is dealing with injuries as well. Draymond says, okay, I can come back and we get a win. It feels like it's just too storybook, but we'll see what happens there. They play. They're about to start, or they have just started on TNT. The Warriors are down 12-13 in that game right now. I'll see if I can pull up and see if Draymond has entered the game yet on our Draymond watch. Also tonight, game Thunder versus Lakers will be an interesting one to see if this upstart Thunder can handle their business against the Lakers or if the Lakers are able to come back. Lakers under 500 right now. Not looking good. See if they're going to get busier on the trade market. Draymond Green has checked in, so Draymond Green is returning today against the Grizzlies. He's played 1 minute, and I have not seen a tweet or a notification that he's been ejected. So we got that going for us. We come back, we're going to put on some sound from Ian Robbie talking about the NFL playoffs. A little recap there from Ian Robbie. When we come back here, text line still open, 512-447-3776. Who do you think should be the coach of the Cowboys tomorrow? Let us know on the Sports Complex here on the Horn 1019, AM 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com. Back on the Sports Complex here on the Horn. Gonna play some up. Welcome up with Ian Rob B this morning, talking about the NFL wildcard weekend, the Texans and the Cowboys. Some takes from our boys in a Hook 'em Up with Ian Rob B replay right here on the Sports Complex.
All right, let's talk about the Texans win and the Cowboys disappointing loss. We've talked about this before, and I've said it, over the last few years. Whether you're talking about the Longhorns or whether you're talking about NFL teams, you want to win a big game in football, you got to break tendency at the right time. Teams are so dialed into your trends and the patterns and your habits as a team, as a play caller, especially at the end of the season when you have so much sample size and the data scientists that every team has in their on their staffs now. They have people that can figure out exactly what your trends are, patterns are, and different combinations of concepts that you're going to use based on formation, based on personnel grouping, based on down distance circumstance. I mean, it is crazy how detailed it is these days. And you hear me giving some of those numbers and sharing those things with you. Imagine 15 Rod B's just in a room figuring out that kind of stuff. That's what NFL teams have at their disposal. That's why you got to break tendency at the right time. And just the smallest tendency breaker, whether it be a concept or whether it's a scheme or the way you use personnel, can really change the game and really flip the script for you as a team. The Texans, I think they did a few things that were considered tendency breakers in my opinion. Let's start with DeMeco Ryans, and he mentioned this earlier, but Next Gen Stats has the breakdown of it, and you got to give my man DeMeco Ryans a lot of credit. Now, the last time prior to this playoff matchup that the Texans played the Browns, Amari Cooper went off for 265 yards, 2 touchdowns, set a franchise record. Remember, I told you guys on Friday, I said he's not going to go off like that. All right. If you want to bet some money on Amari Cooper's numbers, bet the under, get chance. DeMeco Ryans is going to have a plan to take Amari Cooper away. You just can't. There's no way I would respect DeMeco Ryans as a defensive mind if you allow a receiver to have a 265 yards receiving in one game, and then the very next time you play him, you allow him to go off again for even 100 yards. So I told you to take the under on whatever the stats were for Amari Cooper. I just didn't know the strategy that would be deployed by DeMeco Ryans. And turns out it was a simple one. Derek Stingley. Now, Derek Stingley did not shadow in coverage. And shadow means follow a receiver around everywhere they go on the football field. He did not shadow a player in coverage in a game during the regular season at all. So not one game, they decided to shadow Stingley with a top receiver or any receiver during the regular season. And he only aligned on the right side as a right cornerback on just 3 snaps. In the first half alone, just in the first half, he was a right cornerback on 14 snaps. So he had only aligned the right cornerback 3 times. He was already aligned there 14 times in the first half. If you're the Browns, you're building a game plan on, all right, this guy does not go to the right side of the field, ever. It's very rare. So we actually know we can find favorable matchups over there. Well, no, you don't. I'm going to force you to make an adjustment immediately. That was just in the first half. All right. If you go look at all throughout the game, Derek Stingley aligned across from Amari Cooper 35 of 42 snaps. That's 83% shadow rate. Before the Texans basically were done and sent in the backups, he allowed just 1 reception for -6 yards on 3 targets as the nearest defender. And if you go look at week 16, last time they played him when Amari Cooper went off, he targets and receptions. He had 4. I think there were 4 targets. He allowed 3 receptions. He had average separation was 1.3 yards, so it wasn't bad, but here it was 0.7 yards. So basically allowing him to shadow Amari Cooper when he really wasn't a shadow defender was a great way to break tendency. And by the time that the Browns could adjust, they had no way to adjust. I mean, there was nothing they really could do. The Texans had overwhelmed them. So it was a slight adjustment, but it really did make the difference and held Amari Cooper in check for the Texans. We also talked about the offense for the Texans and how Bobby Slowick was dialing up a really good game plan. He knew that the Browns would be in a lot of single high coverages, also knew they would play a lot of man-to-man. They were top 5 in both man-to-man rate in the NFL and in single high rate and in cover 1 rate. So you know they're going to play a lot of man-to-man. You know they're going to play a lot of single high. And I thought it was a really smart move by them to use a lot of condensed and compressed sets. That's when you have all of the receivers compacted together close to the line of scrimmage. And then you can create space on the outside, space on the perimeter that way. Also forces the DBs to give you space. They can't play bump and run in that situation. They can, but then they risk getting rubbed or getting picked. So most of them will give you space, and they will pass off routes, pass off receivers in coverage. Well, that gives the receivers a free release. Creating space on the outside with a free release, and it does a lot of different things to counter man-to-man, because it gives the receivers just a free release off the line of scrimmage. That helps the timing of the routes, and then you're creating space on the outside from the condensed and the compressed sets, and that's going to allow the receivers to win the leverage battle, because then you know the leverage most of the time of the DBs. They're going to be, a lot of times, almost forced to try to be outside leverage, and if they're inside leverage, you win again, because you basically the entire third of the field is open, because they're allowing you to have a third of the field on the outside. You create that space, but if they're outside, also it allows you as a receiver, especially if you have deep crossing routes, it allows you to get to the other side of the formation quicker, because you're in a condensed compressed set. You're already halfway there, instead of coming from a slot or coming from the number one receiver side spot when you have to come all the way across the field. So they're minor little tweaks. And I'll go back and try to check how often the Texans run these types of formations. And they run them some, but I saw probably more in this game that I've seen from Bobby Slowick in any game that I've watched so far this season, or as many as I've seen in any game I've watched this season. Peter King had this quote. He had the Coach of the Week honors. He gives it out in his Monday morning quarterback, or Football Morning America, I believe is his column now, but with Pro Football Talk. And he said that Bobby Slowick was his Coach of the Week. And here's what he says about Bobby Slowick. He said, per Next Gen Stats, 8 of C.J. Stroud's 21 passes were targeted to receivers who had at least 5 yards of separation from the nearest defender. So we talked about these guys were running wide open. They certainly were. And all they needed was they were schemed up wide window throws and made life really easy on a young quarterback who had struggled, as I told you guys, all season long throwing against man coverage. Well, if I scheme up wider window throws with a lot of separation, that's the only tough thing about throwing against man, the tight windows. They're tighter windows to throw through, and this time he made those wide windows. So give Bobby Slowick credit, and I thought a lot of that was him breaking tendency also at the right time.
And I said this earlier about C.J. Stroud. I think part, having watched all of his games this year, I think part of why he struggled against man coverage is especially when like Nico Collins was down, he didn't have receivers that could beat man coverage. He was trying to throw into super tight windows and try to fit it in, right? Because you guys covered.
Yep.
And he's not a great receiver. So I think he struggled with that. But, man, when he has his full complement of receivers like he did in this game, and you have Bobby Slowick dialing up and breaking tendencies and misdirections to clear one side of the field, everything you just said, we still saw how accurate he can be. But in the end of the day, they scored 45 points, and he only had to throw the ball 21 times. That's because the defense was great. And here's the thing about the Texans moving forward. I know we're talking about the Cowboys this morning. At the end of the day, and we talked about this all year, Rod, the Cowboys went 12-5. Texans went 10-7. Texans lost a game like to Carolina that they shouldn't have lost. They lost some games as a young team that they had no business losing. The Texans actually beat better teams this year. I mean, they beat Cincinnati in Cincinnati before Joe Burrow got hurt. They beat Pittsburgh like a drum. They beat Jacksonville when Jacksonville was still playing good football at 37-17. They beat Denver when Denver came in, and Denver was the hottest team in football, and they beat them. They've beaten. So the point being, they're not afraid of anybody. It's meaning moving forward, whether they play Baltimore in Baltimore or Kansas City in Kansas City, they're going to bring a good game. Now, this team, that's one other thing where DeMeco Ryans, I think, because this team believes they can play with anybody. They don't know. Whereas the Cowboys, the best team the Cowboys beat all year was
Detroit. They beat the Rams, beat Philly, so they beat 3 playoff teams.
And they beat, but unlike, because I'm not going to parse the numbers, but at the end when they played the Rams were terrible. That was at the beginning of the year.
Yes, that was true. And the Eagles were spiraling.
And the Eagles were in the beginning of their spiral, their disintegration.
Yeah.
And the Lions game was controversial because if the 2-point conversion is allowed, they lose. So. And the Texans played Cincinnati in Cincy when they were hot. They had won like 4 or 5 in a row, and Joe Burrow was just getting healthy, and they beat them. Beat Pittsburgh way back. They beat, as I said, that Denver team when Denver was showing
I
signs
think
of
they
life.
won like 5 in a row or something like that.
They had. So, and then, then they went and played the Jets, and C.J. Stroud got hurt, and, Will Anderson got hurt in that game, and Nico Collins got hurt, and then they kind of tumbled a little bit there near the end of the year, but they righted the ship, beat Tennessee and Indianapolis down the road, and so there's a confidence in this team that I don't see in the Cowboys against good teams. They're not going to fear Kansas City if they go into Kansas City.
No.
They may not beat them, but they will not fear that team. They really won't, and C.J. Stroud will. There's a toughness to that team that I even go back and what's amazing. I'll find this quote this week, especially because I think they're going to end up playing Baltimore in Baltimore, and maybe you'll find
the team they played to start the season.
Yeah, but if you go, John Harbaugh after they won the game 25-9, John Harbaugh said that's the team that's going to win a lot of games this year. You guys don't believe it. You watch. That's a team that's going to win some games this year. That's a better team than you think they are, and he was spot on because there's something about him. And I remember watching that game thinking, wow, this team's better than I thought. They lost 25-9, but it kind of got out of hand at the end, and the touchdown was added. But man, there's something that, and this goes to culture and DeMeco Ryans. It's what Dan Campbell's, brought to the Lions. They believe. Mm-hmm. There's a belief, Rod, that they can win, and DeMeco Ryans and this Texans team, they have it. I don't know that they can win their next game, but man, they're gonna give a fight. They'll give a fight, and you just went through with Bobby Slowick and your rant. They'll have a good game plan.
They'll be well coached. And yeah, I mean, it's something about right now C.J. Stroud and the way he's playing that's inspiring this group. Like, he's uplifting the play of others around him. There are guys that are playing above their skill set. They're outperforming their contracts, right, and outperforming their evaluations. And I think it's like you said, it's because they believe, and part of what they believe in is not only DeMeco Ryans, but it's also this young QB. Last 3 games, this guy, since coming back from his concussion, 76% completion percentage, 75.9. I guess I'm rounding up. The record for a full season is 74.4. Touchdown interception ratio 6-0. Passer rating of 130.3, which is out of this world. And his yards per attempt is 9.5, which is basically a first down every time he attempts a pass. I mean, this dude is in the last 3 games he's playing out of his mind.
Well, a couple things happened for the Texans, and we'll talk about them all week long. We'll know today after about 6 o'clock tonight who they're going to play. It's either going to be at Baltimore or at Kansas City at 3:30 on Saturday. I always talk about that Carolina game that they lost coming out of the bye week, 15-13. That was the last game this year where Dameon Pierce got more carries than Devin Singletary. I believe after that game, the coaching staff kind of gave up on Dameon Pierce being a good fit for what they're doing, and they went to Singletary, and he's been great. We had the stat during the game that in the last 8 weeks, he's the 3rd leading rusher in the NFL behind Christian McCaffrey and I can't remember who the other one was, but it was somebody really good. Maybe Raheem Mostert in Miami. I mean, 3rd leading rusher in the league.
That's crazy.
And he's been great. He's given some balance to their offense, and they've gotten healthy on their offensive line. Let's mention that too, healthier up front. So yeah, they'll look. I mean, in Kansas City, they'll beat themselves sometimes. They beat Miami, but that was not much of a Miami effort. So man, if the Houston can get Kansas City, so if you're a Texans fan, you're probably rooting for Pittsburgh today. Because if Pittsburgh were to win, they'd go to Baltimore for an AFC North clash. You'd go to Kansas City to play the Chiefs.
It's amazing that because Dameon Pierce had such a great rookie year.
I know.
And it was almost, crowned, considered the heir apparent to starting running back for the Texans. But I like that they, that was a new offense. They're running the Shanahan offense, which is a zone blocking scheme. And there's some running backs that are better at running power schemes.
Yep.
Some running backs are better at gap schemes and zone blocking schemes. So I just think he's better at the zone blocking scheme. And maybe Dameon Pierce is more of a gap, gap power kind of counter guy instead of the zone blocking scheme, and it works. You're right, because even Singletary, and he runs hard.
He runs through some people.
He runs through some people. He breaks tackles at the second level. It's not only that he's a one-cut runner, but once he gets to the second level, man, he breaks tackles. So I can see why they're saying, you know what, we can't afford to waste downs giving the ball to Pierce just so he can get in a groove when this guy is being productive.
And now you're second and long, right? Because he just stopped for no gain. And there were some runs, and we mentioned Owusu Koromoa for the Browns, their overly aggressive linebacker who's really good, but he had some of those jump cuts where he would press the hole and keep Koromoa in the hole and then bounce it to the outside and beat him to the corner. Yeah.
Yep. It was nice.
Really impressive. Really, and obviously if you got Laramie Tunsil plowing the way at left tackle, which they did, helps clear that hole. So there's lots to like about where Houston is. And I don't, Baltimore, we'll see. But if they're playing Kansas City, I think they've got a puncher's chance in that game. I'm going to pick the Patrick Mahomes, best quarterback of of this era. But at the same time, they're not a perfect team in Kansas City. We know that.
Yeah.
And Houston's playing some good football. They've got some good wins under their belt. And that just gives you the ceiling of the future of this franchise, because we've told you now that you've seen, if you watched them on Saturday and went, wow, 45-14, they're really good. Well, they have the third most cap space in the league.
Mm-hmm.
They've got, by beating the Browns, their now draft pick is the Browns pick, which means it's higher than their own pick in the NFL draft, and they've got draft capital, and they've got this good young roster.
They got
So
5-year window.
Lots to like.
It's wide open,
and it's not to rub it into the Cowboys, but it's the exact opposite of the Cowboys. The Cowboys window was this year. They now have a ton of free agents, including Tyron Smith and Tony Pollard and Tyler Biotis, your starting center. All these guys. Jaron Kearse, Stephon Gilmore, and they've got to sign CD and Micah and Dak. I don't know how they're going to do all this, and they're going to lose some good coaches, and they're going to have to cut some guys loose. Yeah, you're concerned if you're the Cowboys about where they are. Texans, meanwhile, on this ascent with a rookie quarterback and a pretty talented football team and a really good young coach.
The most remarkable stat, I think, still from that Cowboys debacle was that Michael Parsons, for the second game in a row against the Packers, only had one pressure. He had one pressure when they played him last season too, and this season, one pressure. That is the lowest pressure rate in a game in his career. That is great game planning. They used a balanced play calling. They used up-tempo pace as well, and different personnel groupings and formational versatility to essentially remove the threat
of Dak Prescott and move the pocket a little bit.
Michael Parsons. Like, he wasn't even a threat against him.
You're right about that. Well said. And the Cowboys didn't seem like much of a threat at all in that game in any phase, but very disappointing. Who would have thought? 45-14 Houston, 48-32 Green Bay. That's why we play the game.
Good stuff there from Hook 'em Up with E and Rod B. Weekday morning, 6 to 11, right here on the Horn. All right, we're going to take our last break. We can come back, wrap the show up, give you another update here on Pittsburgh and Buffalo. If you're a Texans fan, you're kind of rooting for Pittsburgh. Unless you don't want to meet KC. If Pittsburgh wins, Texas goes to Kansas City next week to take on the Chiefs. If Buffalo holds on and wins, then the Texans would be going to Baltimore. So that is what you're watching if you're a Texans fan. But we'll get to that. Any more texts you want to send in? Any more takes? Anybody who wants to say who the next coach of the Cowboys should be? 512-447-3776 is the text line. We're going to come back, wrap things up here on the Sports Complex on the Horn 1019 AM 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com. All right, we got to get out of here. Appreciate everyone who did tune in today. I know the roads are iffy in some places, okay in others, but iffy in some places. They're telling you to stay home, and if you can't stay home, why wouldn't you? But anybody who was off today, celebrating MLK Day, a good day to celebrate. So we enjoy it. We appreciate those of you who did tune in. We'll come back tomorrow, break down some more. We'll have a little bit more time in between the Cowboys loss and the season ending for the Cowboys and what that means and what we're moving forward. Maybe some more clarity on what will be happening with the Arizona head coaching search as well. All of that on the show tomorrow. Update before we get off of here. Buffalo just hit a field goal, is up 24-10 against the Steelers. We'll talk about it tomorrow on the Sports Complex, but until then, be kind, be safe, keep your underwear clean. We'll see you right back here tomorrow for more from the Sports Complex.